Welcome to Hashtag Trending, the weekend edition. So here we are at our third recorded meeting for Project Synapse. It's a small group of friends who meet and help each other keep up with AI. We've got Marcel Gagné, an author, tech enthusiast. Marcel has had a long career in IT and published a number of books, but probably best known for his Cooking with Linux blog that went on for, I think, over a decade. Welcome, Marcel.
Thank you. Hi.
And John Pannard. Now, Marcel and I are both consultants, but John actually has a real job. So we need to keep him around to keep us grounded. But he's an IT exec with a financial institution and a cybersecurity expert. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me again. Nice to see
There you
you
go.
gentlemen again.
You say the nicest things. Well, some of them true. Yeah. Most of you will know me as the voice of your morning tech news at Hashtag Trending, our daily news podcast, or Cybersecurity Today. I'm also a long-term IT exec and consultant and a CIO was a CIO at a former IT World Canada for about 10 years, run my own consulting practice as well. So that's the three of us. Gentlemen, I've figured this out. If I've got the numbers right, we have over 120 years of experience probably in this podcast.
And I feel every single one of those years.
Yeah. Hopefully it's evenly split. And hopefully that we don't fulfill that famous saying, which is, do you have 120 years of experience or do you have 1 year 120 times? So we'll find out. The point of this show was we talked about over the past two shows that we've recorded, and we've met more than that, obviously, but the past two shows we've recorded, we talked about how we'd gotten to where we got and the basis of where we were with AI. Then we talked a little bit about the present and what was out there now and what was happening now. And that's always a moving target. And partway through that, we started to come up against this same thing that I've heard before from many people, which is, what am I supposed to do? I get all that. How do I get started? And that was the essence of this show, was to talk a little bit about that and share our experience with the audience on how you can actually get started with all of this.
One of the things that comes to mind is, as every single major product that's out there is rolling out some kind of AI integration into it. And there are, of course, a number of people who just ignore the fact that it's there. I'll give you an idea. A little while ago, I decided that I was getting rather tired of maintaining an email server for clients. And slowly but surely, I started moving everybody over to Google Workspace. In other words, I'll let Google deal with all the headaches of maintaining servers and so forth. But one of the cool things about dealing with something like that is Google's Gemini AI chatbot is integrated into all these things. And a really easy way in is just to note the fact that when you're replying to an email or something like that, and you hit that reply button, you'll see that there's something at the bottom that says, "Help me write," at the bottom of it. And it will summarize the document for you, and it will create a first draft of what your reply might be based on what you enter and what you ask for. And sometimes it's as simple as just noticing the things that are in front of your face.
And John, you're out there every day. We've talked about this, about getting started, even in your own company. People are asking you questions about how you get started.
You can read until you're blue in the face. You can talk to people, but you have to do it. You have to actually sit in front of a keyboard and use it and try all kinds of different things. Even for me, I had a colleague, also known as Marcel Gagné, that said, try using ChatGPT to create prompts for you. And I've been using ChatGPT for almost 2 years now, and I'd never even thought about that. And it's quite interesting, the prompting that you use to create a prompt, and then how much more detailed that is than what I would have created. And then you use that to actually ask ChatGPT, and yeah, it's great, but you have to use it and you have to play with it we talked about this last week. You have to play with it. So that you can understand.
Don't you hate it when he's right? I was listening to this interview with Dario Lamode from Claude AI, and the lady, and her name escaped me, but who actually deals with the prompt and the personality of Claude, was on, and she sounded like Gagné here. She said, "I ask it how to construct the prompt."
Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about it, there are a whole fascinating tools out there. As Jim, I've been getting rather fascinated with things like video production and things like this. And you'll see that a whole bunch of them, it's like you write a first line or what it is that you want. And there will even be a button that says, "Would you like me to enhance this prompt for you?" In other words, you've created something already. You said, I want a still shot of this, but I want it to slowly zoom in while this character does this on the screen. And then it actually says, this may be a little bit sparse. Would you like me to improve that, to embellish it somewhat so that you get something that's a bit higher quality? And what I said about email is something similar. Like, for instance, if I hit the reply button, I wanted to see exactly what it says. Google says, help me write. And then there's an Alt H. And then if you do Alt H, it pops up a little tiny window that says, ask a question to get started or say something to get started. And then I'll fill in the email. Now, I'm not suggesting that people have it write their whole email for them, but sometimes you're just sitting there, okay, how do I start this basis? And
Yeah.
then you go in and you edit it and you personalize it and then you send it out.
But what am I supposed to be doing? And to me, this feels a lot like the cloud did 15 years ago,
Mhm.
right? It was technically we were already there. Uh, the pieces were there for the most part. Yes, you could find some little thing to pick at, but most people were coming to cloud with one of three attitudes. And I used to do all these workshops on cloud and how to keep up with the cloud. People would come in and say, first of all, there'd be some people going, "What's cloud? I know it's out there. I hear all about it all the time,
Yeah.
but I have no idea what to do." There were other people who went, "I know it's important, but it's all hype." And the third ones were the ones who came in and said, "Okay, I know I have to know how to do this, but I need to be able to explain the value of it to my company. I've got to actually show them how we can get value and make money from this." And I think as I'm looking around and thinking about the people that might be out there listening to this or watching it on YouTube, then, which one of those three camps do you fall into? And I think there could still be people in any one of those three.
Oh, for sure.
I want to attack the whole idea that it's all hype. And I'm going to attack it this way. Every new product that's out there, every new idea that comes up, whether it's AI or whether it's the latest fashion or something like that, has to have some kind of a hype cycle associated with it because you've got to get it into people's consciousness one way or the other. And when you say hype, unfortunately, it decreases the value of it and people's perception of it's all hype. It really doesn't mean anything anyway. You ever seen the bit where Homer Simpson says, the internet, is that thing still around? That
Yep.
was just some passing phase, but the internet was hype. If you remember the early days, it would be like, we just got the internet, as though the internet was like a product that you installed on your PC or something, or it was actually just, hey, the cloud, since you brought that one up. So I think we got to stop using the word hype. Or hype is just how we build up excitement about something. Saying it's all hype takes away from the fact that there's actual usefulness there.
I
But I
mean,
think the other
hype is
thing too,
overhyped.
Yes, hype is overhyped.
I think the other thing
Darn
too,
it
though,
all.
Jim, is that for people that are trying to figure out what they can do with it or what it can do for them, ask it.
Yeah.
Ask
Yeah.
AI. I'm in a financial industry. What can you do to help me? Or
Yeah.
I have two kids and how can AI help me? And let it
No,
tell you.
it really does involve that. I want to go back to Marcel's comment about hype, though, and that's because the cloud also had a guy I really remember. He was in Calgary, and I could watch. I knew where the tipping point for the cloud came, at least out there, and that's this guy came the first time to one of my sessions about a year before this one that I'm going to talk about. But he was there, and he said, "I'm here, but I don't believe in this. It's all hype." And I said, "So why'd you come?" He said, "I need some arguments to argue against it." Okay. And fortunately, he didn't make the thing miserable for me. As a facilitator, when you walk in one of those, you go, "Oh, this is going to be a fun day." But he was okay. It was good. The next year, he came back. I recognized him. I said, "You came back." He said, "Yeah, I need to know how to implement this." And so all of those conversations you may be having, they'll turn on you and they'll start asking you, why aren't we using this?
Cell phones were a thing like that as well. The idea of a Bluetooth headset or something like that. Of course, we'd all look weird with the old style Bluetooth headsets with the microphone hanging over our mouths. But the reason for someone having even a cell phone was like, what do I need a cell phone for? There are phone booths there. I can stop and pull over somewhere and use a telephone. I don't need that. And then at some point, it just made sense. There's this adoption curve for almost every product at some point or another. Yes, granted, there are things that come and go, like chia pets, but the chia pets are still around. You can go out and buy those things.
They came back.
You get desperate enough and you haven't done your Christmas shopping. Chia Pet looks damn good, my friend.
But that
Yes,
the hype is, you could say that about anything. I remember when the iPad first came out. I remember the first time I saw an iPad and I'm like, why would anybody want to use that? It's just, what can you do with it? But you look at now, personally, I use my iPad more than I use my computer. And I had the same thing with my wife with her cell phone when she got her first iPhone.
Like, I actually had to get a smartphone for my wife because she had exactly the same idea. Like, why do I need to carry this
Yeah.
thing around with me? And I think I wound up selling it on the basis of because I want to know that if you're stuck somewhere on the highway or whatever, I want to know that you're safe. That was my argument. It was a safety argument. And maybe that's actually one of the things that we need to think about when you're trying to integrate something. What's an argument beyond, hey, this is the next cool thing? What's an argument that makes sense that you can wrap your head around that's
Yeah.
really simple? Like you're
Yeah.
stuck on the highway. Now you've got a lifeline that's sitting in your pocket.
My wife thought this was all crazy. She always has thought this is crazy. She thinks that a lot of these things are just stupid and nothing I can say is going to get through to her. When she discovers the value herself of something, she digs into it, she knows it. And from the person who's sitting there going, "This stupid computer, can you come over and fix it?" All of a sudden, she's coming over to me and showing me how to do stuff because she found value in it.
Yep.
And I think we miss that point. No amount of talking or telling is going to get people to the level of understanding the value. It's only when they have the experience themselves.
And I think that kind of goes back to what I had said earlier was you can talk to people, you can read things about AI, but until you actually sit in front of a computer or your phone or whatever and start using it, you're not going to understand the value of it. And we keep talking about the art of the possible. The more you use it, the more ideas you have of other ways that you can utilize it.
There's a line from the movie The Matrix where somebody says, you can't just tell someone about the Matrix. They have to see it for themselves. You're not going to understand what I'm talking about
Yeah.
until you're actually in there experiencing it for yourself. And there is such a thing as information overload. God knows I escape the fine edge of that all the time. I know you do as well, Jim, as you're trying to keep up on what the latest story is. What's the latest thing that's happening? What are people talking about? It's hard to actually stay on top of that. So if you're trying to figure out how to integrate this, then maybe you start breaking it down to something really simple. And some of the things that are really simple and that kind of make sense is if you have anything other, and you could argue that a single entrepreneur has that as well, but if you're any size company whatsoever, you've got a few basic things that wrap around all the time. You're always going to have some kind of communications, whether it's email, whether it's customer service on the phone or something like that. So that's like a starting point is what can I do to improve that side of things? The other thing that you've got is like communication in general. And that tends to be things like content marketing. I'm going to have to advertise to somebody. I'm going to have to put some kind of a message out there. And that's something that makes perfect sense to every company that's out there. I've got to be able to communicate with people in some way, including people who are yet already my customers. Then you've got the keeping up of business, the day to day aspects of business. I've got to be able to keep customer records, who bought what they're interested in, who I have to get back to at some point. And AI integration in tools. Then there are things like this, like people are sitting in meetings every day. They're having Zoom calls with each other and so on. And if you're on in front of a camera for 6 hours and you're having one conversation after another and you're just scribbling down crib notes on the side and hopefully trying to stay on top of those things, maybe it makes sense to have some kind of a transcription tool that's keeping track
Yep.
of the conversation that summarizes it for you before you go away. So those are all things that exist in all businesses, but they're all simple things that you can wrap your head around and you can say, yes, these are things that I need to do. And what are those things that are going to make this a little bit better? And even things like time management is this is how much time it is likely to take you.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I did the other day was we're at work, we're a Microsoft shop. So we use Teams and Microsoft 365 and so forth. And so I was asking AI how to go about taking a Teams meeting and converting it to meeting minutes, or action items, and all the rest of that. And it actually comes back and gives you step by step as to how to go about doing it. And
Yeah.
sitting there trying to figure that out and trying to research it can take a long time
But that's a
versus
really
asking AI and get an answer in 3 minutes.
but that's customer support. That's a really simple application that every business has to deal with, customer
Yeah.
support. And like I'm a big open source guy and I have used open source tools going back decades. And one of my old favorite, to be honest, I don't use it these days, but one of my old favorite tools was Thunderbird, an email client. And I have a customer who actually
Blast
called
from
me
the
up and
past.
said, No, actually, believe it or not,
It's
Thunderbird is
coming
still out
back.
there and going strong.
Is it?
It is actually, yeah, Jim's right. It's
Okay.
coming back, and it's got a glossy, nice new interface, and it's got some really cool tools built into it. And I installed it yesterday for the first time. And one of the questions I was asked was, how do I create an alias, an email alias? And I have no freaking idea. I have not looked at this in years. I don't remember how to do this in there. Again, same thing. How do I create an alias in there to do this? Boom.
Yeah.
That's customer service.
Yep.
And that's the kind of question that you can answer when you've got someone on the phone. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with somebody calling you up on the phone, asking you for help because they trust you to provide an answer. And because you don't have the answers sitting right there, but you do have this helper beside you, you can answer those questions quicker and you can make your customers happier by being able to do it quicker.
I had a support manager, and he was famous for telling the staff, ask Dr. Google, right? Google it. And nobody, and a lot of, you'd be surprised who would phone you, and they hadn't Googled it.
Yep.
The answer was right there. Right now it's Perplexity it, right? If you, or use an AI for that, soon you'll be able to use OpenAI search. But let's get to step one, because I think we've solidified on step one, and that is people
All
need
right.
some exposure. And I think we've explained that. I would say that one of the services you can do is what John's doing. Go learn something that's really useful to people, save some time and show it to them. And so whether it's
Yep.
a lunch and learn, whether it's a cool tools thing, you've got to expose people not to the bigness of it. I've got a new Edge browser upgrade this morning. Big thing on read all this stuff on what we can do with Copilot. I will read all the stuff you can do on Copilot because it's my job, but it's not everybody else's job to keep up. They have
Right.
lives, and we can forget that. So one of the
Unlike
things I
us.
think the principles, not like us, yeah, not like us, but even even the three of us pulling together so that we could share things and figure things out. It's a great thing to do. So step one, cool tools, whether it's a lunch and learn, whether it's just a list of things that are annoying that you can show people that are cool to do. That's a really good way to get started. No pressure. You can use it or not. This can make your emails go a lot faster, and it can, believe me. But even just that, getting rid of that feeling that you have when you're in a rush and you haven't spell checked your email or checked, you can spell check it with something, but this will actually tell you that's a really dumb sentence. Change it.
Yeah.
And it
there's a
doesn't
better
matter. And I call it the talent enhancer, but it does check that. And outside of having a breathalyzer on your email, which I think I should have invented, would have saved my career many times. But having this to check your email and go, do you really, because actually in some of these things, it really will say, do you really want to say it that way?
Mhm.
Yeah. But I think,
And by the way, sorry, I was just going to say, remember as well that you can preload a lot of these. Obviously, the stuff that's integrated is going to be preloaded a specific way. But I have all of my personal agents that I've created. I have told them how I want them to sound, how I like to express myself. I tell them that generally speaking, I'm a casual guy, so I want you to respond in a casual way. So it doesn't have to sound robotic. It doesn't have to sound all businessy. You can actually give these things personality.
I think
Yeah.
when you're looking for ideas, we're talking about brainstorming. If you're looking for ideas of things to try out and things that would maybe they'll work better with AI, look at all the things that you do manually. I talked about meeting minutes, but all kinds of other tasks that you do on a daily basis that are manual. Or how can I have 300 emails a day that I have to respond to. How can I do that more efficiently? Can I use AI for some of it? Maybe not all, but can I use it for a majority of them?
Yeah.
And just try it. Because as I said earlier, the more you try it, the more you play with it, the better you'll get at it and the more ideas you'll have of ways that you can utilize it.
So let them discover, start small. And I will say this, the wisdom of the years, I have tackled a lot of big projects, and everything I've ever failed on has been really big. The small stuff works. And I discovered much later in my career, move incrementally through small achievements. Gosh,
Yep.
brainstorm, but think small. Make sure that these things have very little consequences and a lot of benefit. And you can find a lot
Yeah.
of them. I think that's piece one. Piece two, if you get your company, or at least some people, a group of people excited about doing something, how do you get them to understand what's possible? And what I've done, I'll share this with you. I created this practical guide to AI for business, and you can download it here. And by the way, I'll put a link to it. It is from my consulting company, Performance Advantage, for anybody who wants to. No big salesperson is going to call you. Trust me, we suck at sales. So nobody's going to pounce on you and call you if you download this thing, but it's pretty good. And it reflects what I've thought about. And that is, I put together a simple list of 10 areas where you could probably find benefits. So if you wanted to start a workshop, now you get some people excited, you want to start a workshop on this, I listed out 10 things that I could show them, and they're simple. Automated customer support. You can, where you want to get a little more involved, here's some of the things that are happening on websites. You could show them all kinds of examples that are out there. Content copywriting, email, Marcel's talked about that. Data analytics. I got a separate video on data analytics that my analytics guy did. That's just incredible what you can do. Never do another pivot table, like as long as you live. You've got language translation, training, marketing material, appointment setting, personalized recommendations for things, and automated task management. You can do all kinds of things. Marcel, you've done tons of stuff with simple agents and there are lots of people who are creating them out there. They're not that hard to create. And even if you get somebody else to create them for you, they're really beneficial and fast. Marcel created one for me to check. I don't know if you created it for me. I've adopted it now.
I
got to
did.
check.
You're the one that asked me about it. So,
Yeah. No, but I have to check stories. I read a lot of stories and I can
that
ask
one.
myself,
Okay.
is this true? But I had to ask myself, is this true? Which means I got to look around it sometimes. If you've been in IT long enough, I look at a story and I say, I know that there's just something about this that's not right. And so I've got to say, I just don't believe it. There's something behind the story somebody's missed. And just because it's published somewhere, believe it or not, does not make it true. And so I'm doing this research. Marcel comes up and he says, oh, I wrote something for that. And I actually use it. It'll check, it'll pull out every story along that topic. And he's even got a report card for me that says A, B, C, or C based on how many times it turns up. And I know
And F,
I can,
don't forget F.
there's F too. Yeah, but I can look at it and say, if it's made the New York Times, it's made Forbes, and it's made here, the fact that it turned up in this little blog, it's still probably, it's got a foundation. And that's a big deal for me. Saves me a half an hour on a story,
Well, you're
sometimes more.
welcome.
Well, oh yeah. Thank you, Marcel. We missed that part of it. But that's what I mean about little clever things that can save you a lot of time. And if you pull my list of 10 or any other list, you can start people talking about those. And I got this from watching, everybody's tried in healthcare to do a pile of stuff. The people in Alberta, I forget the name of the facility, but they really run a lot of the provincial health programs. And they really got on board with automation. And they're very successful. They've got great results. And I asked the guy, I said, what made this so successful? He said, I found annoying things that people didn't want to do, where there were a lot of them and they were relatively easy to automate, and we automated. What?
And sometimes that process is sitting down and having a casual conversation. We're chatting right now, right? But sitting down and saying, okay, I have some ideas. And the back and forth is like Google was wonderful. It was fantastic. It's this place that lets you search like all knowledge on the internet and so on. But what it didn't have was a way to do the back and forth. All right, listen, 5 minutes ago, we were talking about these sorts of things. How does that relate to this? And having that kind of a conversation makes it possible for you to create a solution. And that
Yeah.
solution could just be that it's an answer that you didn't have staring in front of you in the first time, or it can be, let me put together an actual automated solution, whether it's a program, like for instance, I routinely have it create Python programs for me of things that I'm going to do on a regular basis. And now they're sitting on my computer and I just run this little program as opposed to asking each time, how it is, do I do those things? That's the benefit of having that back and forth conversation. And you have to think of the agent, the AI on the other side, as just being a really competent, not necessarily employee, but a really competent coworker that you can bounce ideas off of back and forth.
I think two areas to me that are big. One is look at ways to simplify your life. Right? What can AI help you do to simplify? We talked about taking notes or minutes and things like that. But the other one is things that you want to do, but don't know how to do it. Ask AI.
Are you familiar with the guy who is the current CEO of AI at Microsoft, Mustafa Solomon, who is also the guy who was behind Inflection AI that created the Pi chatbot? He just did a really fascinating interview, and maybe it might be
Ooh,
worthwhile linking that to take a look at it. But he
yeah.
did
Can
this
you send me the
fascinating
link
little
and I'll
interview.
put it up?
Yeah, and remind me afterwards, and I'll send you the link to include in the show notes. But what he said was, we are inside Microsoft at this moment. They have agents that have they're developing agents that have virtually limitless memory. In other words, everything that you say, everything that you think, every idea that you toss about. Remember, as a writer, I have a drawer full of this is a cool story idea, or this is a cool thing that I stick in a box and I never look at again. These ideas, I have no idea how many ideas have piled up over the years, but they're scattered absolutely everywhere. There are technologies that are being developed right now. And again, apparently Microsoft is sitting on top of this stuff. And I know that Google is actually doing exactly the same thing, where you can effectively have it remember everything for you and then go back through all of those challenges that you've had, all of those ideas that you've had. And this idea of a context window where I only remember the last 1,000 things that we just, or the last 1,000 characters of our discussion, or the last couple of days worth of conversation. This could soon be a thing of the past. So simplify your life. What's simpler than having somebody who remembers everything for you?
We'll be there. And this is the point I want to get to as well, is that people could say you're not at artificial general intelligence yet. And don't listen to those people, because that
We don't have to
doesn't
be.
matter. It really doesn't matter. We're on the edge, though, of doing some incredibly important things, breaking the context window, agents on the computer. These things will automate us in ways over the next 6 months that people cannot even begin to appreciate. So this is a really big thing that is going to happen. And you don't have to get to super AI for this to be really effective.
You
I
don't want
sent
to
you a
go
really
from
cool.
walking to flying a jet fighter overnight. You need to work your way up to it and get involved with AI and things. Understand it before you get into AGI. That
Yep.
you're not going to know
As
what
a
to
guy
do
with a
with it.
pilot's license, I don't want everyone flying. I just want to say that.
And I'm sure John will agree with this. I'm not sure I want everybody doing a lot of things,
Yes, for sure.
but they're not going to stop.
No, actually, they're not. They're not. There's a fascinating article that I actually sent in our Discord. We've got a little private Discord,
Good.
the three of us, where we chat about things. And I sent a story this morning, which was fascinating. It's a story that was a study that was done at Stanford, working with Google's DeepMind. And what they did was they had people sit down and do a 2-hour interview. But they had people sit down and do a 2-hour interview where the AI effectively built if you'll pardon the expression, a replica of them through this 2-hour interview. After they were done, they had the person do surveys, answer questions, talk about this or that, express opinions, and so on. And they had their AI clone do the same thing. What was fascinating to me about that is it had an 85% at this point, like right now, today, it had an 85% accuracy in how it responded to these surveys, to these
Wow.
opinion calls, to these conversations. At some point, you will be able to trust an AI to act on your behalf for a whole bunch of things like that. And that is actually one of those things that everybody should probably keep an eye on, and businesses should certainly be keeping an eye on this. The idea that you can have this extra employee that knows what you like, knows what your ambitions are, knows what your goals are, and can, help to answer those questions without you having to think about them because it thinks like you.
Yeah.
Isn't that scary?
No, but it's not for us. I go back to the average employee and you go, some of them will be really into this. Some of them will go, I have no idea. Some of them say, just get away. I've got other stuff to do. And so one of the things that I've put together is to say, look, don't go and ask people what they want. Let them show you what they need. Get the discussion going. Prime the pump, whatever you want to call it. And my little piece that I created, or the guide that I created, I put together a list. All I did was I took a list of the areas of a company. I took a look at the common processes. I took the processes and actions. I did this off the top of my head. You could do it with AI. I said,
Yep.
what are all the things you do? And I put those together, and people can download this themselves, show it to people. It'll start them talking, start them thinking. You can do memos, you can do research, just simple research things. Every one of us has to look something up in a day, whether it's the name of somebody, how to do something. I cannot count the hours I've saved just being able to go in and get explanations of how to do something. You can do all kinds of things with this. And so I just created that chart, put it up, and that's the start. Because you said, Marcel, a chat, you can start people talking about where they see themselves in this. And then on my third column, I put the key processes and actions, the things that
Yeah.
are a little more interesting and more unique to them. So if you can prime the pump and get that discussion starting, that's much better than going to them saying, what do you need AI for? Or them coming to you and saying, what do I need AI for? Meaningless conversation. Get them talking.
No,
As you said, get them chatting about it.
you need
Let's
the
bring back the
primer.
word chat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you need the primer to that document you've got is great because it gets people to start thinking about, I don't do that in my job, but I do this and this. And they can that helps to start building that document for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that hard. I've adapted a lot of this from portfolio management, what that we invented when I was at DMR, and I didn't invent it. My staff did, but they were brilliant. Get people to talk about things. How do you get them? Especially if you're in IT, you don't want people to give you ideas. That's more stuff you haven't got budget to do. And that was the old way of thinking about it. Now we're in a world where you can't think that way. Everybody gets it, but you have to manage to do some things and get results from them. And then people will hopefully be able to invest in you.
Fun fact, fun story. A long time ago, I worked at a company. I won't mention the name at the moment, but I worked at a company where I would walk into the accountant's office and he would look at me and he would go, "How much is it going to cost me, Marcel?"
Oh yeah. 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 I, I've, I've been tortured by CFOs. Jim, I've got a stack of business cases in my office. And if they all came true, we'd have zero cost and we'd be making billions. He said, so put it on that pile.
There's those ideas. There's that idea pile that you need to be able to get
Yeah.
back to at some point.
But you know how you get past that? And we did. And I will say this, we did get past it. We started to show the value of what people were doing on a regular basis. And it's that simple. People forget. We'd pick the things based on value. We'd find things we could do with a short time frame at first and find value and put those together. And we created this idea of the portfolio. And again, if people are interested in it, you can see it, the document I put together, you can download it. And we really took a look at things. You don't have to be by the way, and we did this at companies as big as AT&T in the US and companies like Nova Gas. We did it all around and people found value in it. And we did a simple thing. We said, how long will it take or how much resources will it take for us to do this? What is the value we're going to receive? Yeah, about equating that with the amount of investment we're going to make into it. And the third thing we asked ourselves is, how confident do we feel about the risk of this? How confident do we feel that we're going to get that? And we used that to create a simple 2x2. And in the top part of that 2x2 was the stuff could be done quickly and had a high benefit. Absolutely. You can just picture that curve. Gartner uses this, McKinsey uses this. You don't have to spend $10,000 for a week of McKinsey's time. You can do this yourself or get Marcel, get me to help you with it or somebody. There's lots of people who understand this. So we would put those together, but we'd already agreed, and this is important, agreed on how you measure them. And so we did this, and I've done this for jaded executives in mining companies in Manitoba, and then I let the people decide what they wanted to do based on that, pick 3 or 4 of them and do them and measure them the way you said you were going to measure them, and then come back and present. And I got to tell you, we talk jaded executives, Marcel, when people who work there, not the consultant, but people who work there come back and say, this is the stuff we promised to do. 2 of them went well, and we got really good results from them. 1 of them, not so good. The 4th was a failure. They focus on the 2 that are successful.
There's a gazillion stories by economists. Kahneman, I think, is one of the ones who talked about these things that you remember You remember the thing that went well as opposed to the thing that didn't go well. If
Yeah.
nothing went well, obviously you don't remember that. And of course, I know we've got three guys sitting here chatting. Okay. But let's be, the three of us agree right now that we're thankful that we're guys and we didn't have to give birth. We're good with that? All three of us? Okay. I was
Because
there
the
for the
human
birth.
race
Yeah,
would have, I was there and the human race would have stopped. I got to tell you that.
exactly. I was there for the birth of both of my children, and the amount of pain that my wife went through to bring these children into the world to this day boggles my mind. But what she remembers is that there are these two great kids and the after effect and the actual process of going through all of that pain is just like this dim memory in the background somewhere. That's the part that you don't actually remember because you're left with this really good feeling otherwise. So if you try a bunch of things and you've got two or three failures, but you've got like one rousing success, that's what you're going to focus on. You're going to focus on the rousing success. So yes, being able to measure, being able to do enough things. What's that expression? If you haven't succeeded, it's because you haven't failed often enough.
And that's the thing is find the successes because that'll also help to guide you into the next areas that you want to work on.
And quietly learn from your failures. I still remember
Yep.
telling somebody, and I must have said it too much at one client side. I said, oh, the things I'd learned by things I'd done wrong. And the client looked at me and says, Jim, we'd really like it if you didn't learn anything while you're here. And that's the truth. We had this thing when I was at Ernst & Young, somebody stood up and said this, get out there and you'll have to fail. And our chairman stood up and said, hang on, we're accountants. I'm not interested in learning from your failures. At least he was honest about it. People want success. They don't want to learn from your failures. You need to. That was a great thing because these people had successes. They're willing to talk about what went wrong. I still remember sitting at a whiteboard with two people. An IT guy was going, these users want this. The person from the business area is going, they just never listen to me. And we just got them working through this, got them to draw the problem on a board. Just don't know. Just draw it out for me. I just want to see it. And in the middle of it, they're looking at this piece in the middle. And the IT person they'd been writing memos, they'd been scathing notes. And the IT person looked at the person from the business and says, that's all you want? My work there was done.
Mhm. Mhm.
We can talk about things on that basis. We can be successful. And again, talking about successes, but you're going to do that if you start small, if you log the things, and people want all kinds of stuff done. That's great. Log it, put it in its appropriate part on the chart. This is really hard. It's going to take a substantial amount of effort. It does have a great amount of benefits. We're iffy about the risk. Nothing wrong with that.
There are little things that you can do, very little things that you can do, but you also have to recognize that you did those little things because that's part of the whole appreciating your successes. Sometimes it's almost as if the little things aren't worth talking about. The little successes aren't worth talking about because you didn't do anything really big. If it was that simple, obviously it doesn't have any value because
Yep.
it didn't have to spend a lot of time and energy and money doing these things. A gazillion years ago, I did some work as a consultant for a number of hospitals. And I remember going in one day that there was some quiet spot and I was asked something really simple. We were doing a few more complex things, but I was doing something really simple. I went over to talk to one of the people and she said, I don't suppose you could help me with this printer. And of course I said, sure. That's not what I was there to talk to her about, but I said, sure. What's the problem? And she said, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 6 months. I've had people who have walked in here and the printer still doesn't work. And of course I sat down and I got it working in about 30 seconds flat. And she said, it's been 6 months. We did have the conversation about what we were supposed to talk about. So I could
Yep.
go back and do my other work. But that's the part that she remembers, this little niggling thing that got solved for her after 6 months.
So, Jim,
So
can I put my cybersecurity hat on for a minute
please,
Sure.
with the
Absolutely.
whole
I think that's a
discussion?
good piece to look at this.
Yeah, because I think one of the things, look, I'm all for people trying things out, figuring out what they can do with AI to help to enhance their lives and the business, but you also have to look at security. There have been a number of cases where people have used the free version of ChatGPT and put company confidential information up there. That goes out there and everybody's got access to it. So you need to make sure that you understand what security you have within the tool. I'll talk about Copilot because with Copilot, if you have the right Microsoft licensing, we have E5 licenses at work that keeps Copilot in your own private tenant. So you're not sharing the information out to the world. And that makes a big difference because we're not going to put our member data out to the free version of ChatGPT, but we might be willing to do it into the private tenant Copilot. And so you have to consider that when you're looking at what tools you're using. And we've talked about try things. You have to consider what's the implication of me trying that on these various tools. Where is that data going to end up?
You've just made the greatest argument for doing a strategy of anybody. And
Yeah.
that is, if you sit in your office and you wait for them to learn or wait for them to request this stuff, they're doing it already.
Yep.
If you get involved and you start to do something, whether it's the framework that I proposed or anything else, you're involved in it. You can guide them. You can sort through these things. And by all means, go out and get somebody who's experienced, who knows, who played with AI and actually can advise you on the security. Some things that sound really insecure are not.
Yep.
Some things that sound
Advice.
easy and secure are desperate. Never do them. If you can do simple things, and Marcel will talk about this for sure, because we're both open source guys. If it's really that compact, you want to try it out, you can spin up some open source stuff in your own four walls and do things if
Yep.
that's what it takes. But only if you're involved in the process can you be the person who helps guide them to the right avenues. And by the way, you also have to deal with that thing of there's 60 million tools out there. Do you
Yes.
really want to use 60 million of them in your organization so that everybody's got their own? They will. It's been done. That's how it happens if you don't get involved. Or do you want to get them to say, look, I know Copilot's a pain, or I know you don't want to use ChatGPT, or I know you don't want to use Claude. Try this out because this is really good for this. And just because a vendor has it attached to their software does not make it the best tool to do the job. And that's just a fact. And you might not need that level of integration, but whatever it is, you can be involved.
You can also take a moment to ask yourself when you're making your chart, you can also put a pin in those things that are vitally important, that they remain private, and those things that aren't.
Yeah.
There are things where you're just brainstorming. It doesn't actually matter what happens. People, as writers, are, especially if you're starting out as a writer, you're notoriously fond of your own words without realizing the fact that words are a dime a dozen. There's an old expression.
I'm crushed. Yeah, yeah. It's now $1.50 a dozen, and it's all the same.
Or whatever it happens to be. But the fact is, those things are not, they're not that important. And the value of them from the perspective of them being thrown out into the big wide world is, but there are things obviously that you don't want everyone to know, which is why we don't dox people on the internet. We don't share people's home addresses and phone numbers with the big wide world for exactly those reasons. So I think when you're making that little chart and you're pushing things in there, it's what things are critical from a security
Yeah.
perspective and what things can I do and not really have to worry about it.
Yeah. And when you're building that list, do it with a lens of security
Yeah.
and privacy.
How much risk are you willing to take as a business with that one? Which is the beautiful question. Does that have a lot of personal data in it? And so we're measuring whether this is going to be successful or not. One of those key aspects could be, is it going to cause harm to our business? So let's just
What's
go
your
through
risk
that
appetite?
checklist. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your risk appetite for this? Is it worth it?
And that's
Some things.
yeah, that's where you need a guy like John who can
Yeah.
actually answer those questions.
Well, yeah, I think, or you don't have to answer the questions. You have to ask the right ones.
Yes, you're right.
You know,
Because you're right, Jim, because Marcel was kind enough to say you need somebody like me. I can't necessarily answer all the questions, but hopefully I can ask the right ones so that they can answer it themselves.
Just for the record, if I need a plumber, I'm not going to do it myself. I'm going to hire a plumber.
And I don't do my own fillings, and I don't cut my own hair. It shows. Not me, but
We did during the pandemic, but that's another
that's
story.
true. Yeah. No, but that's the thing. I know John has his day job. Marcel and I are both consultants. There are people who can help you through this, and
Yes.
you should think about that. Now, whether you do it or not, I don't care.
But it
The
needs
idea
to be
is,
something that you do think about.
Do we have enough expertise to do this? Should I learn it myself, or should I get somebody who's done it before? And that's
Well,
a good question to ask.
and tied in with that, if we've talked about this for the last almost an hour about coming up with ideas and how can we be successful in implementing AI in our business. One of the things, obviously, I talked about security and privacy, but you also have to look at skill set. Do we have the right skills in house? If we don't, can we train in house, or do we need to bring somebody in that can help us?
Yeah. And that's the point of my start small strategy, is it
Yeah.
gets you very quickly to the point where you can have intelligent conversations. The greatest piece of advice I got on this was from, and I think it was actually, I think it was Sam Altman said it, was, and I probably said it last week, was, and I was listening to Eric Schmidt do a thing, and really worthwhile. We'll put a list of a couple of these things in the show notes so you can listen to them yourself. Worth hearing from these people. Both of them said essentially the same thing. And that was that, don't think about where you're going to be in 5 years as being impossible now because everything's moving so fast. But think of where you're going to be in the future. You need to be able to imagine that. Then think where you're going to go in the next year and move in that direction. Trying to just keep ahead of everything is not a winning strategy. And it will cause you to pursue things that may not be valuable at all to this. And
Yeah.
Schmidt said this, and I'm really big believer in this. The big tech companies love to turn over, and I'm not accusing all of them, but they love to just get rid of people and get the bright new faces in. And the bright new faces, nothing wrong with bringing in some new talent. It's a wonderful thing, but be careful. Eric Schmidt said, what he did at Google is he said they never really did any layoffs when he was the CEO. He said, we hired the right people. We took a long time to do it. And if you're not doing layoffs, it also means you're doing something else. And I think that was the Friday time or whatever, is you're discovering how people can learn and branch out and do new things.
Yes.
And that's
Retraining.
And so don't think of your people in the way of AI is going to replace them. Maybe AI is going to enable them. Maybe if I give them the chance, it will free them up. The other philosophical thing that I heard from a small business guy I was interviewing in the US, and the wonderful thing of doing podcasts, you get to talk to all these people. But he said, I don't care if my people are more productive and have more free time. If we're successful as a business, we should be sharing that success. And that's not a bad attitude to have.
Yeah.
This guy, by the way, is pretty damn successful.
Yeah. If people can figure out ways to utilize AI as an example, to give them the ability to do 100% of their job in 70% of the time, what's wrong with giving them some of that 30% back for themselves?
Works for me.
Yeah.
Last words, guys? Anything as we wrap up? What would you like to leave everybody with a message of?
Go
My
ahead,
message
Marcel.
is always exactly the same. It's a really exciting time. There are dark and scary clouds out on the horizon, but it's also a very exciting time and a really cool time to be alive. I think if you have a playful attitude and if you go into everything with the idea that there's a bright Star Trek future out there, then I think you'll survive and thrive much better in this age if you can have more of an abundance attitude or more of a bright skies attitude than, oh my God, this is going to take away all our jobs. This is a cool time and these are cool things. And we just have to figure out how to make our lives better with these cool things rather than just trying to figure out how we take ourselves out of the equation. I think that's a losing strategy. I think it's a losing strategy for business as well. If your whole point is, oh, cool, now I've got AI, I don't need employees. You know what? You're doing it wrong. I think I'll just leave it there.
Mine would be start small, but start. You have to start playing with this and learning it and seeing what you can do with it.
Yeah, mine would be have a structure to show value. You can do all these wonderful things, but do them, engage other people in them. If you have all the best ideas, then you're the wrong person for the job because nothing succeeds like an idea that somebody else has had. So create the opportunity for them to be successful, create the way to measure that in their own terms, and keep reminding them. If we do that, I think we might get to this point in business where we start to do what I think you really need to do. The technology's there. The technology's fundamentally there. The real issue is going to be, are like the old story of the guy who was being chased by the bear and he looks at his friend, starts lacing up his running shoes and The guy says, you can't outrun the bear. He said, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. And the future will go to those people who can make this really work on the important things, delivering value to our customers and the people we serve. That simple.
By all means, don't untie your friend's shoelaces. For God's sakes, that's just terrible.
Or tie them together.
Okay. I wasn't saying sabotage. I was saying outrun him. We have
I know what you were
officially,
saying, but
yeah. Okay. Great story, but officially we've devolved. Marcel Gagné, thank you. Always a pleasure.
good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. John Pannard, thank you very much. This has been great. Hopefully we've left people
Yeah, it
with
was a
something.
great chat.
Yeah. And if you want some of the things, if you want the practical guide or some of the links that we'll put in there, you can get those in the show notes. And you can go to technewsday.ca or .com. Take your pick. It will respond to either. So technewsday.ca or .com. And you can go to the podcast page and you'll find the show notes, and this will all be in there. Probably if you're listening to this Saturday morning, by Saturday afternoon, give me a break. I can have my coffee and get all this stuff organized. Thanks again. I'm your host, Jim Love. This has been #Trending, the weekend edition. Thanks for listening.